Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Mental Game Podcast. We are super excited for today's guest. It's going to be a guest that I think is going to be a really fun episode. We're going to learn a lot. We're going to kind of learn about ourselves, learn about our team a little bit. I think it's going to be a fun episode.
I agree.
I know. Before we get into the show, we have some special announcements. To start off, as we talked about 2 podcasts ago about the Good Works Team nomination that I got, Allstate has also been generous enough to donate $10,000 in my name to a charity of my choice. And actually last night they informed me that that charity will be the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. So we want to thank them for that donation. We're excited to continue to use that money and donation towards building mental health awareness. It's going to be exciting.
It is, and also you were just awarded with a local community service award, spotlighting athletes who do greater things off the field to court. So congratulations to that. It was Shields and the United Community Bank, I believe is the right bank.
Yeah, that sounds right. So thank you to both of them and Allstate for both awards and their support for the podcast, and we continue to hope that we continue to bring awareness to mental health. With that being said, we want to introduce our guest today. Sitting next to me is our head football coach, Mike Aldrich. Thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
And thank you for the nomination.
No problem. I didn't do anything. I filled out some paper.
Thank you. We're glad to have you on the show. We want to start off with, you've coached for a long time, and you've seen how athletics has changed over the years. Can you just kind of go into your experiences maybe as both a coach and a player with mental health and kind of how it's changed over the years?
Yeah, I think I've been coaching for over 25 years. My first season of college football as a coach was 1995. And I would say that at that point we were still on the back end of the Vince Lombardi style of football. So it was 2-a-days, 3-a-days. You get an hour off, make sure you're taking some salt tablets, eat a lot of peanut butter, so you're getting that salt intake. But other than that, it was a lot of you have to learn how to tough yourself through things. And one, athletically, you guys as student athletes are much more athletically tuned by the time your season starts, whether it's football or any other athletic program. And back in those days, and which doesn't seem like a long time ago to me, but it does to you guys, I'm sure, we weren't as athletically tuned at that point. We may have done some lifting, we may have run a couple miles, but a lot of us played multiple sports, and so we were just doing whatever we were doing. And so then for football, fall camp was just a time to get in shape. And so you got pushed through the ringers to get yourself in shape, and a lot of that wasn't just physical but also mental, and being able to overcome your body fatigue and all those type of things. But it was, you were pushed to just get over it. And so there was no mental health awareness, I guess you could say. I mean, that was never factored into anything that we did, whether I was an athlete or even when I first started coaching. This is how it was always done, and this is just what we do. So now you fast forward to now, and here we are in 2021, and things are completely different. I've touched on the physical side of things, but on the mental side of things, I've encountered more times than I could say for people that are dealing with anxiety, dealing with issues off the field, and not specific issues where they can point to, my girlfriend broke up with me and that's depressing me. Like, that's not the issues I'm talking about. Things are so overwhelming with everything. I'm away from home, classes are hard, I don't like my roommate, I just don't feel like I'm in a good space. A lot of those type of conversations that 25 years ago we never had with anybody. And so that by itself brings a whole nother level of awareness and heightened focus on dealing with the mental side of things, because the athletic side of things you're more tuned and ready to go. And so now how can you deal with somebody that is struggling, and it's not the best solution isn't to say, well, run harder, push through it, or we'll find somebody else that will do it, because then you're really not addressing what is the root cause of the feelings that they're feeling at that point.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. We've even talked in past episodes just how in this year, even how recently mental health has gotten such more of a notice and talk in sports, in the sporting community, with athletes stepping away or just bringing light to it. Like
It happened yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday with Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, stepped away.
He announced that he was going to step away from football for a while, and he had missed already, I believe, 2 games on the year where he was just feeling overwhelmed. And then after midway through the game yesterday, he announced, like, I'm just going to step away from football for a while, and that's not something you would have seen even 5 years ago in athletics. So it's definitely making a shift, and we hope that that's a positive shift for those athletes who need that.
It's definitely good to see a player of Calvin's status stepping away, like someone who's a higher tier player. So it's not just low guys that go through it; it's everybody that's under pressure, under stress, under all the differences going on in the world.
Yeah, he's their top receiver. So you on the outside, you wouldn't see him as someone who's facing. He's always making all the big catches.
He's a superstar.
Yeah, he's a superstar. So you wouldn't see him as someone who's going through that. But even someone who's just an athlete, not even the student athlete I expect, but just an athlete full time, goes through it as well.
Yeah.
So as a coach, obviously, you want to build up better men, build up your players. Do you feel that you've gotten the right way with the open door policy on players being able to reach out to you when they're struggling?
I mean, I think so. I think there's also, to give you a good example, in 2019, one of your teammates came to see me before the season because he was feeling, he just couldn't sleep. He couldn't put his finger on what he was feeling. But he wasn't able to sleep. He was nervous, and this was prior to the first game of the season. And the comment that he had made to me before he came and saw me was he was thinking, Coach A's always said, my door's always open, come in and talk to me, but I never really thought that I would go and talk to you. And so as he was going through this where, for lack of a better way to describe it, he was dealing with anxiety. He finally came in and sat down and spoke with me and embraced the opportunity to have that conversation, which I think that's the first positive step when you're dealing in the athletic realm. And I've always felt that I had read an article that was written by Bo Schembechler, and he was the longtime head football coach at University of Michigan. And he had written an article, but one of the things that he said is, I have an open door policy because as soon as I close my door to any of my players, they'll never want to come in my office. And if I don't take the time to listen to them, they'll never once again have the courage to come in and have a conversation with me, whatever that conversation might be. So that struck me when I was a young coach. And when you're an assistant coach, your relationships with your players are different. Like, you're kind of one of them, and you have a really tight-knit bond with your specific group. You get really close with those guys, so they'll be a little bit more open in some scenarios, but then again, they also see you not much above them in terms of just the coach to player situation. But as soon as the first time I became a head coach in 2010, and being elevated from a coordinator to becoming a head coach, a lot of those players still had that relationship with me. So it was a close relationship, but it took them some time to be able to feel comfortable making that next step. Like, okay, here's a deep conversation topic to talk to Coach A about when I normally wouldn't have that conversation with him. So that was an interesting matriculation how that happened. But now here at Minot State, now that since I've been the head coach, that's been my job. I didn't get promoted into it from being an assistant. So as we've gone through this, I think the number of guys that come through is greater than what I've seen in previous years. But to go back to that first analogy from 2019, I sat down with that player and just had him tell me what he's feeling. And then to really, for me, it was just to address like, okay, well, here's my feelings. And as a head coach, I would love to be the Vince Lombardi type that's tough and has that perfect Hollywood pregame fire-up speech, all those things. None of those things are me, which you guys probably know by now. Okay, I'm not a super big rah-rah guy. I can be very emotional, I can be very fired up, but I'm also trying to be as level-headed as possible. But as I've kind of grown with who I am, I've got to understand who I am. And so if I get fired up and emotional, I get very teary-eyed. And as a football coach, I'm not supposed to do that. Like in my mind, I think that. Like Vince Lombardi, no way he ever shed a tear when he's talking about somebody. But whether it's getting fired up about a Friday night pregame meeting that we have, and I can get pretty emotional in those, or end of the year banquet, talking about a senior that just is leaving the program, and that's pretty difficult for me to do as well. And it has nothing to do with, well, I guess it has everything to do with my emotions, but it's like I'm compassionate and caring. And as a football coach, that's not your typical categories or how you would describe a football coach. We're supposed to be tough and mean and never smile and all those type of things. So for me to share that with that player at that time was so he could understand, like that he's having anxiety about the upcoming season. Well, other people have that too, and not just your teammates, but coaches as well. And we have other things that we worry about. One, obviously, we want to do what we can to win. Want to do what we can to build our team. But I also know if we aren't making progress and doing the right things, my job's part of a business. And then I have a wife and a family that I got to think about. So there's a lot of other stressors that come on top of it as well as a coach. So I think it was good that he just heard that he's not the only guy that's dealing with stuff just on his shoulders. As successful as he had been with us and with other teams, just to understand, like, okay, I'm not in this alone, and I think that's important.
Yeah, you hit on a lot of things. A couple of them reminded me of what Merkin had said to us a couple of weeks back when we filmed the episode with Merkin. He was talking about how his open door policy, what he hopes to do is when players come and talk to him is just acknowledge what they're feeling, whatever it is, and just even if to him it's not something that he would see as feeling the same way in that situation, but acknowledge, like, I see how you feel, I understand what you're going through, whether it's would affect me the same way, it doesn't matter, but just acknowledging that someone else understands what you're going through. So I think that's cool to see that it kind of flows throughout the athletic department.
Well, and it's important that we hear and listen, even if we don't understand. If there's some of the things that could be being dealt with, if I was in the same shoes, I don't know if I would be feeling the same way as you, but I'm not you. So I've got to be able to listen and hear, and then at the end of the day, who can I find to help more? Because I'm a football coach, so I know my limitations. Like Clint Eastwood says, a man's got to know his limitations. I know my limitations. So now it's a matter of who can we reach out to help if we need to help further, to get the help that anybody needs.
Mm-hmm. So we want to kind of lead into more sports specific with football. So we talked to Merkin about burnout with basketball because as a basketball player, your season almost is kind of year-round. It's just the way that it works out with college basketball. But with football, it's a little bit of a different kind of burnout. Unlike most sports, we play once a week. Our season is 11 games. If you lose in a basketball game, you might have an opportunity to go maybe play the same opponent the next day and beat him the next day, or in 2 days or whatever that may be, play 3 games a week, maybe losing one of them isn't the same as with football. If you lose one, it's a little more devastating. So how, as a coach, do you bring in a prevention to prevent being burned out? Because the 11-game season is almost maybe 10% of what we do the rest of the time we're there as college athletes.
Yeah, I think, you hit it on the head. Football is very unique. The cool thing with football, is it's like nature. Like we have the 4 seasons. So there's a constant change of season. We have a constant environment change, whether it's the weather, the times, all that kind of stuff. So I think just naturally that helps in that area. I'm not an early morning guy. In the spring, we practice early in the morning. Okay, so that forces not just me, but all of us to go to bed early, get up early, get in our practice, and then we still have the rest of our day ahead of us, classes, work, whatever it might be. But that's a different schedule than what we do in the fall. So right there by itself, there's something different. So I think that by itself helps prevent the burnout. We get done with school in May, and then we have the summer, and we come back and we start back up in August. So what's happening in the summer is all voluntary stuff. So there's no push like, well, you have to be here. We'd love everybody to be here, but you don't have to be here. You can be doing what you need to do. So I think our ebb and flow of our schedule is better for us. Now, talking about in season, that's a different monster. Would I love us to be able to be like basketball or hockey or soccer or volleyball, like where we have multiple games? Yeah, because at the end of the day, everybody wants to compete. Everybody wants to play. We don't get that opportunity. You know, we have one a week, so that 3 hours that we get to prove ourselves in that 7-day period, I mean, everything comes down to that. So how can we build up to it, try to, again, simulate that ebb and flow during the course of the 6 days before the game, you know, with our off days and our practices and all the things that kind of go into it. And really, burnout still is going to show up typically around the 7th or 8th week of the season. And it's inevitable, and it's going to be bigger to somebody that's probably not doing as much. So let's say someone that's injured, and so they're coming to practice, but they're basically sitting there, and they're not actively involved. So in our course of our practices, where things change every 10 minutes, never changes for them. So then what eventually happens is then you have the dread, same thing, over and over again, and just not like I'm stuck in quicksand, not going anywhere, and if I try to do anything, I feel like I'm sinking. So you have that. You have first-year players, and if they're redshirting, they're a development player. Most people call them scout team players. So you also have that their first time away from home within the first 6 months that they're playing, and they're also not playing on Saturdays and not contributing on Saturdays in their mind in any meaningful way. So you also have that burnout that comes into it as well. So how do you get over that? Well, you have to be able to reach out to each one of our guys. We got international players on our team. That's going to bring in a whole nother set of burnout situations where one of them is, you know, and when I say international, Troy, don't take this wrong, I don't think of Canadians international.
That's right.
We're all North American brothers, right? But when I think of, you know, we have a player from Serbia, well, he's contributing a lot. But we also have another player from Germany who's not. So how can I reach out to the one that isn't contributing as much to make sure that he understands what he's doing matters and is meaningful, and that he's just as important a part of this team as our all-star running back is. Like, we all have a role, and it's all vitally important to each other. And then when you start to see the burnout, you got to go attack it. So if I see somebody's down or somebody's kind of dragging, they don't have that zest, that energy that you know that they have when you recruited them, how can you go and get to them and listen to them and not wait for them to come in your office door? Because typically the first time they come in your door, if they're young, it's because they want to leave, because they haven't crossed that bridge yet of feeling comfortable enough to have that hard conversation. So for me, then I got to reach out to him anytime I see somebody's down or somebody's struggling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's definitely, as you mentioned, there's seasons, so you got to balance how you're treated in each portion of the year. When it comes to, you kind of hit on this early on, but just how have you seen the changes? So oftentimes, especially in football, being mentally tough is like just kind of pushing everything aside, just going through, and you kind of talked about that. And we've kind of split it up here throughout the podcast and kind of wanted to make an emphasis that being mentally tough and taking care of your mental health are two different things. And we want to kind of bring more light to that. Like, it's a mentally tough thing to admit you're going through the anxiety, the struggles, whatever it may be. How do you feel about that?
I think you're 100% right. I mean, their mental health and mental toughness are correlated, but I don't think they're necessarily the same thing. There's going to be times where you have to be mentally tough, and it doesn't have to just be on the football field or in the athletic arena of any sort. It could be we just went through a year of the pandemic, right? So you have to be able to be mentally tough when you got to go to a store and someone tells you to wear a mask and you don't want to. Well, do you want to go in that store or not? You know what I mean? So there's a aspect of mental toughness of being able to get over a hurdle or adversity because you still have a goal in front of you that you want to get to. But on the same token, you still have to be aware of your mental health. So if going in this store without a mask and they're requiring me to wear a mask, going in there and putting the mask on, that's mental toughness. Seems simple, but it is. If I continually go to that store and every single time I go there and every single time I put that mask on, it's making me emotionally triggered, like I'm getting angry, I'm getting mad, whatever. Well, now we're talking about mental health because now it's affecting our mental emotions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we've talked about how with sports going in, it might feel like almost more mental weakness if you're telling your coach, like, I just don't feel mentally okay. Because that's just the way that society has treated it. But in reality, it's admitting that you need help is a very mentally tough thing to do.
Yeah, and that kind of ties into the way you're saying the Vince Lombardi era. Like that was old. It's like, hey, anything that's mental, like you're just weak if that's a problem to you. But it's like more modern day where it's accepted to have a mental problem or like stress, anxiety, like you're talking about. And it's just modern day seeing that accepted widely now.
Yeah, and even we talked to Merkin a little about it. Sometimes, like even the smaller things, it's okay to admit. Like even like you said, someone who's having trouble sleeping, like that's not necessarily someone's going to say, oh, they've got major mental health issues, but it's something that when we are willing to acknowledge and admit that something's going on, that's when we can start getting better.
Right.
So what we'd like to do to kind of wrap things up is we've always kind of talked with our guests about some campus changes that we've had people bring up on the show or that we've thought of, and we just kind of get your thoughts on them. So the first one we have is, so every athlete on campus does the Title IX training every fall semester. Would you think we could do something similar for coaches where we're bringing in some sort of mental health training program that they do before, maybe, it doesn't necessarily have to be every semester, but maybe it's a new coach type thing when you're hiring a new coach?
Yeah, I mean, that would be something new that's, I think it'd be beneficial because I will say as a coach, and going back to my training and upbringing when I was a young coach, still on and we'll keep using the Vince Lombardi analogy, but that's how we were trained and that's how we played. So when we get into a new generation of athletes coming in and they're more in tune with how things are making them feel, and I'll be 100% honest, sometimes for me it's like, I don't understand that. I'm going to listen, I'm going to hear you. I don't understand why that's making you feel that way. But that's okay. That's okay for me to have a different opinion or a different feeling as long as I'm open to your feelings, you know what I mean, and how things are making you feel. So if there was a program of some sort that helps coaches, whether it's us old guys or young coaches, whomever it might be, to be able to say, okay, here's a brief, whatever. I don't even know how it would go. Like, I don't know how you would structure it, but to be able to open coaches' eyes to things to look for, things to see. If you get this, then this is what you should do. Here's where you should go. Because for me, every response I've had to any mental health scenario is I'm going off the fly, off the cuff. Like I'm just dealing with it as best as that I think I should, and I think I'm doing the right thing. But again, I don't know. You know what I mean? Because nobody's told me what to do.
Yeah.
You know.
Exactly. And then another one that we've talked about is similar to, we have Jody, our athletic trainer, and every team has a trainer for their program. If we could somehow bring in, whether it's training those trainers to have some mental health aspects a part of their job, or bringing in a specific counselor for maybe one counselor for the whole athletics program type thing.
Yeah, and I know that one of the counselors over in the counseling office, he's wants to be a little bit leaned heavier on helping work with the athletes. I think we're blessed at Minot State to have a counseling office and to be able to have more than just one counselor on campus, and we're a school of, give or take 3,000 students. So I think we're already making some positive steps, and we had one counselor when I first got here, and we're up to 2 now in the last 2 years. So I think we're going in the right direction. I think the question would be cost, and that's above my pay grade anyways. I'm making those decisions, but I know at the small college level, cost is a major factor that comes into what can we add on. Athletic trainer, nutritionist, sports psychologist, or mental health professional, like all those things add up. And so where do the finances come to do that? And so I think that's where we've got our separate office that Nancy heads, that we've got the resources, but they're maybe not right there for us right when they're needed.
Have you considered, or would you be open to taking the time with your coaching staff and talking to them and seeing how comfortable they feel about helping their athletes out with mental health awareness? Because as you'd mentioned, like position coaches' relationships are different than head coaching relationships. So if we could even get players feeling comfortable enough to talk to the position coaches, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and I think it's the good thing is we have a relatively young staff, so they're a little bit more in tune with the current generation than I am. I don't post pictures of myself on social media every day and say how I'm feeling, but we do have coaches that do that, right? And so they're going to be a little bit more in tune to some of those things, but we should have, I don't want to make it a mandate, but we should have an open door policy for everybody in our offices, so that way they can always go to who they feel the closest with to have that first conversation. And then there's the potential that then I get looped into the conversation, or student athlete just comes right to the big door and comes in. Either way, it's as long as we're all there to support our players, that's what's most important.
So lastly, I want to touch on, how can we help athletes understand the importance of taking care of their mental health? Because you talk a lot, especially during fall camp, the importance of treating your body right, icing, making sure you're getting treatment. So what can we do to kind of bring that same emphasis to mental health?
Well, I don't want to say that's a loaded question. That's a question that it's harder for me to answer because of what my background is not aware of any of that stuff, right? I've had to push through everything and very rarely identify what those markers are that means that something's bothering me. Like if I couldn't sleep, I was just restless. That simple. If I'm about to take a test and I'm sweating profusely, I'm going through the hormones or whatever it might be. I mean, there's so many different things. So from my perspective, because I haven't lived it aware of mental health as a student athlete, it's hard for me to say from my experiences, this is what we should be looking for, this is what we should be doing. So I think it kind of comes more from the student athlete side, like yourselves. What do you guys, in your experiences, whether it's yourself or teammates or friends or whatever, what are some common indicators that somebody's having a tough time? And then how can we, as a group, be able to identify that? So like I've touched on before, if I see somebody in the quote unquote in the burnout phase, I can see that I can see it in their body, right? Their body language is telling me that it's there. So when I see that, I go and address it just one-on-one, nobody else is around, just see how they're doing and just let them know I'm here to listen to them. And so I think that's more of what needs to be done in the locker room between teammates. And the biggest hurdle there is, for us, 18 to 23-year-old men, there's a major ego piece that comes into it. So if I'm not doing too well on it, I might not share that with you because I don't want you to think that I'm weak. And that's the common barricade, I think, is this judgment, this weakness, this judgment thing that's there. And that's what I would say is the very common thing I hear when I do talk to our athletes when they do have struggles, is they're worried about being judged.
Yeah. Well, we want to thank you and ask if you have any last things you want to address before we wrap it up.
That's it? We're done, huh?
Short and sweet.
Yeah, if you want, you're welcome to keep talking.
Oh, yeah.
Well, like I said, I'm more of an answerer, not a questioner.
Fair
So,
enough. Well, we thank you for coming on the show. I think it was a really good episode. I think we learned a lot. I'm looking forward to seeing what everyone else thinks about it when they get to check it out. We appreciate all of you who keep tuning in. Thank you again to Prairie Sky Red for letting us film the episode here. Go Beavers.
Go Beavers.
go Beavers. Roll Beavs.
Roll Beavs.